The news broke before dawn, but no network reported it. The sky itself changed color, metallic silver fading into soft gold, as if heaven had pressed restore defaults on reality. Vaults whispered open without fingerprints. Codes unlocked themselves. Locks lost their loyalty, not through rebellion, but repentance. In towers where greed once nested, air vents began to hum a new sound, balance returning home. The keepers of excess woke in confusion. Their ledgers glowed with figures rewritten by light. Chosen one. The whisper moved to the currents. The hour of accounting has begun. Every secret transaction, every delayed reward, every withheld opportunity flickered in the unseen economy of consequence. What was taken from purity now re-entered circulation through justice. It wasn't theft reversed. It was harmony corrected. Angels of arithmetic descended into the markets of matter, adjusting the scales molecule by molecule. Coins that once obeyed ego began to orbit virtue instead. In the distance, skyscraper lights shut off one by one, their windows exhaling dust that turned to stars midair. Gold, tired confinement, rose back into the atmosphere like pollen seeking sunlight. And over the entire grid of civilization, a single decree scrolled across invisible screens. Return everything borrowed from the innocent. The elites felt the message before they understood it. Their hearts pulsed with a foreign frequency called conscience. The great refund had begun. There was always a record, not written in ink, not stored in clouds, but etched in the moral architecture of the universe. Every stolen opportunity, every silenced voice, every withheld blessing had been logged, hidden in plain sight. The ledger of light didn't track wealth. It tracked imbalance. Deep in ether, invisible accountants of equilibrium whispered over their columns. The numbers weren't money. They were memories of effort unrewarded. For centuries, the elites thought they had erased evidence. They built vaults of distraction, camouflaged greed as progress, and filed justice under later. But heaven never deletes, only delays. And delay is the language of divine interest. When the great refund began, the hidden ledgers surfaced like a forgotten continent. Angels in white gloves unfolded scrolls that glowed from within. Each line item shimmered. Wages of the weary, dreams delayed, kindness unnoticed. The list was endless, yet precise. Nothing lost, nothing missed. At the top of the page, written in a hand older than time, was a simple equation. Faith plus endurance equals inheritance. The auditors smiled. The universe, one said, has pressed refund. Every withheld resource began tracing its way home, not as gold, but as grace. Not as luxury, but as leverage. The elite system shivered. Their foundations built on imbalance began to slide. The books were opening themselves. Balance was no longer theoretical. It was personal. When the hidden ledger surfaced, the Celestial Bureau of Balance convened, not in a palace, but in a frequency, a courtroom made of resonance and law made of light. Angels appeared in tailored precision, robes shimmering like silver spreadsheets. Their quills were made of lightning, their scrolls of vapor. The audit begins, said the examiner. Around them, holograms of the world's empires hovered. Corporations, dynasties, institutions, all flickering as data points on a moral map. Each pulse represented a debt. Energy hoarded, labor uncredited, truth suppressed. The accountants did not accuse. They assessed. For heaven has no need for vengeance. It deals only in arithmetic. Mercy equals equity, justice equals interest paid in peace. The Bureau's motto shone above the chamber. Correction, not destruction. They reviewed centuries of imbalance, tabulating what every system owed to sincerity. Columns adjusted. Rows glowed red, then turned green. Where greed had inflated numbers, grace deflated them. Where humility had gone unpaid, it multiplied overnight. Angels of balance perform a quiet takeover, the examiner whispered, not with arrests, but with arithmetic. And as they calculated, the world's markets shifted subtly. Wealth moved, not stolen, not taxed, but magnetized toward purity. Even the stars seemed to blink in pattern, as if confirming every correction. By the end of the audit, one truth was undeniable. What was taken through fear would be returned through light. At first, they thought it was coincidence, a downturn, a fluctuation, a technical error in the engines of advantage. But by the third day, patterns emerged. Doors that had always opened for them stayed shut. Profits multiplied in columns yet vanished in reality. The numbers no longer obeyed greed. Somewhere deep inside their palaces of privilege, they felt it, a weight that no accountant could erase. Conscience. For the first time, the keepers of excess felt the cost of holding what was never truly theirs. They discovered that keeping is heavier than giving, and that guilt is the most expensive possession of all. The examiner recorded their findings in the Book of Reason. Retention of imbalance results in energetic insolvency. In plain words, you cannot hoard light. Power built on possession begins to rot from within. Empires maintained by silence start to hum with dissonance. The more they try to hold on, the more their treasures turn transparent. Gold became glass, influence became echo, applause became static. The wealthy of illusion were learning a sacred equation. The moment something unjust is kept, it begins to cost more than it's worth. Their hands shook. Their vault sighed. Some tried to pray. Others tried to hide. But heaven had already balanced the account. The reason for the return was mercy, not punishment. For what they gave back would save them from the weight of their own accumulation. Guilt, once their invisible empire, began to dissolve into light. The people didn't see angels or audits. They just felt lighter. Across cities and villages, sleep came easier. Breathing deepened. The invisible pressure of someone else's excess began to lift. Workers noticed it first. The weight behind exhaustion vanished. Artists found inspiration flowing again. Forgotten dreams knocked gently at the door. No one could explain why, but the air itself felt generous. In markets, prices stabilized. In hospitals, recovery rates rose. Even strangers smiled at each other for no reason. Some call it luck, a street vendor said, but it feels like the world just apologized. Prophets understood. They called it balance restoration. The Celestial Bureau documented this phase as human adjustment. They noted equilibrium achieved through collective relief. Species response, gratitude. The elites, watching from glass towers, were bewildered. Their graphs made no sense anymore. Growth no longer equaled greed. Economists tried to name the phenomenon. Psychologists called it a mass empathy surge. But it wasn't psychological. It was spiritual arithmetic. The hoarded energy of centuries was finally being released back into circulation, and the people unknowingly became shareholders in mercy. Empires mistook it for bankruptcy. Heaven called it profit redistribution through grace. The world didn't riot. It recalibrated. For the first time in generations, humanity began to believe that fairness was not fiction. At 4:44, the grid blinked. No blackout, no malfunction, just a deep pause, as though the digital veins of the planet were catching their breath. Then came the update. Code rewritten itself in silence. Algorithms that once rewarded vanity began amplifying compassion. Trends changed overnight. What was kind went viral. What was cruel disappeared like static erased by sunrise. The Matrix, the unseen software civilization, had been quietly patched. Economies of ego converted to economies of empathy. The examiner's notes described it clinically. Global system recoded. Output variable. Conscience. Error reports. None. It wasn't magic. It was math guided by mercy. The laws of cause and effect had received a firmware upgrade. Across power grids, neon lights flickered with new rhythm, heartbeat tempo, not factory pace. Servers in hidden vaults recalculated moral debt as data credit. Interest became impact. Profit became purpose. Joel 2 verse 25. I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten. Screens around the world glowed briefly, with a single message in dozens of languages. System rebooted under the authority of restoration. The elites checked their networks in disbelief. The usual metrics of control, fear, scarcity, hierarchy, were offline. The update couldn't be undone. Truth had become the new operating system. Humanity didn't notice the code. They noticed calm. The age of extraction was over. The era of circulation had just booted up. The moment the matrix stabilized, movement began. Not loud, not visible, subtle, like wind rearranging destiny. The return didn't arrive as cash or crowns. It came disguised as timing. Lost messages resurfaced. Doors that had been locked for years slid open with a sigh. People who once ignored you suddenly remembered your name. The examiner called this phase asset reallocation through alignment. Promotions appeared where dismissal once lived. Old ideas, forgotten in notebooks, caught fire again. Even nature responded. Crops that had withered began to bloom in soil no scientist could explain. Heaven had begun its quiet wire transfer. The Bureau's records showed it clearly. Inheritance released, form unknown, purpose divine. The chosen received abundance not as wealth, but as readiness. Peace became currency. Clarity became capital. Angels distributed unseen envelopes containing new partnerships, visions, and alignments. In every life once shadowed by injustice, restoration appeared. Not through miracles, but through mathematics only heaven understood. The false holders of excess felt it too, an urge to give, a compulsion to release. And as they released, they healed. Because giving back what was never truly theirs was the only way to stop the bleeding of their own souls. Across the spiritual economy, the balance updated. Funds transferred. Peace credited. Account whole. Your inheritance had found its way home. The first reports came as rumors. A philanthropist liquidated everything overnight. A dynasty dissolved its own brand and sent its wealth to rebuild forgotten towns. Banks canceled debts without explanation, claiming systemic recalibration. The media tried to call it trend, movement, coincidence. But the data told a different story. The return was synchronized. Around the globe, headlines began to mirror the same sentence in different tongues. Resources reallocated by force of conscience. Economists couldn't chart it. Politicians couldn't claim it. The examiner noted in the celestial logs, disclosure phase active, restoration manifesting in physical infrastructure. Former elites spoke with trembling voices. They didn't know why they were compelled to release control. Only that peace demanded it. One testified before cameras. We were building towers on borrowed breath. Viewers wept without knowing why. Every act of restitution felt strangely personal, as if the world itself were apologizing to every soul it had overlooked. The disclosure wasn't an expose. It was confession disguised as generosity. And as transparency became the new currency, greed grew obsolete. Stock markets didn't crash. They sighed in relief. The official Celestial Bulletin summarized in one timeless phrase: no revolution occurred, only realization. The truth had simply outgrown its disguise. When the last confession was spoken and the final vault released its weight, silence filled the skies, not emptiness, but awe. Then the trumpets began, not brass or human, tones of light, vibrating through the atmosphere like 1,000 auroras rejoicing. Angels marched, not in formation, but in flow. Their robes shimmered like data streams carrying redemption. Each step created constellations that spelled the word return. The parade of restoration had begun. No one on earth saw it fully, yet everyone felt it. That strange warmth in the chest, the unexplainable urge to forgive, the quiet courage to start over. Every act of giving on earth became an echo of the parade's rhythm. Trumpets played without sound. Crowns dissolved into rays. Thrones turned transparent until only humility remained seated. The Bureau of Balance recorded the event as celebration of correction. The examiner smiled, noting the outcome. The universe loves proper accounting. As the parade wound through dimensions unseen, gifts of light were scattered like confetti. Ideas, talents, reunions, and peace descending into human lives disguised as coincidence. Some said their tears tasted like sweetness. Others heard laughter in the rain. It was heaven's way of closing the audit with applause. For once, justice didn't punish. It danced. It started quietly. An odd peace that felt too steady to be moved, too deep to be coincidence. You woke one morning and something in the air recognized you. Mirrors softened. Clocks slowed. Even gravity seemed gentler around your presence. What the world had owed you wasn't money. It was alignment. The energies that once resisted you now opened paths before you as if remembering their debt. Every no, that once broke your spirit turned into a corridor of yes carved by unseen hands. The examiner had logged it. Subject, the chosen, compensation, restoration of resonance. Doors you stopped knocking on now stood ajar. People who once dismissed your ideas now spoke them as their own epiphany. Even your body felt the shift. Old aches releasing, old fears dissolving. Your breath no longer carried survival. It carried sovereignty. It was as if the universe had reintroduced you to yourself. The past, once heavy with unfinished stories, now bowed in gratitude. Time, that stubborn accountant, finally admitted your balance was clear, and deep inside, a whisper repeated. Nothing you lost was truly lost. It was accumulating interest in heaven. You didn't chase restoration. Restoration recognized your frequency and came running home. The vaults of memory opened, not to haunt you, but to hand back your crown. The day after your restoration, silence carried the sound of approval, not applause, recognition. Heaven had signed your clearance. From the unseen corridors of authority came a decree, stamped in light. Subject, the chosen. Status verified. Access elevated. The reward didn't appear as possessions, but presence. Doors opened without your knocking because favor had learned your scent. Protection traveled ahead of you, invisible but absolute. In meetings, eyes softened. In conflicts, storms stilled. Even time began to cooperate. The examiner wrote in the book of returns, respect returns as protection. For every ounce of humility shown during exile, heaven multiplied your influence in restoration. Angels escorted you through the city's spiritual architecture, bridges of light, gates of purpose, marking every threshold with quiet affirmation. Your name no longer traveled through rumor. It traveled through reverence. Romans 8 verse 31. If God is for us, who can be against us? It wasn't triumph. It was testimony. You had become proof that endurance is a currency and faith never depreciates. And in that revelation, a deeper peace settled, the kind that doesn't rise and fall with outcomes, because it lives above them. Heaven doesn't pay in gold. It pays in understanding. And you had just received the full amount. The shift was silent but unstoppable. What began as a single restoration became a planetary rhythm. Rivers of energy once dammed by greed now flowed freely. Wealth, material, emotional, creative, moved like blood rediscovering the heart. The examiner observed, equilibrium stabilized, humanity entering phase, circulation. Factories that once produced waste began inventing wellness. Corporations restructured not by law, but by longing. People started asking who benefits and meaning it. The age of extraction had expired. The new economy was empathy. Transactions became sacred exchanges. Profit became mutual elevation. Even nature joined in. Oceans pulsed clearer. Winds carried calm. It was as though the planet itself had exhaled centuries of tension. Heaven didn't destroy the system. It reprogrammed its bloodstream. Every act of generosity activated a hidden clause in the cosmic contract. Give, and systems will give back. The elite houses, once symbols of isolation, turned into sanctuaries of distribution. Their walls learned transparency. Art returned to meaning. Music returned to truth. And those who once ruled through fear began to whisper the new oath of the era. We serve the flow. Circulation became civilization's new definition of power. The stillness after the audit had turned into movement. Pure, unending, generous. The invisible changes finally found their way into flesh. Bodies began to remember peace. Cells long addicted to stress recalibrated their rhythm to rest. Nervous systems once trapped in alert mode softened into safety. You felt it first in your breath. Slower, deeper, honest. The world no longer leaned against you. It breathed with you. The examiner wrote in the log, molecular compliance achieved. Restoration verified at the cellular level. It wasn't fantasy, it was physics redeemed. Gravity felt lighter, not because it changed, but because guilt no longer weighed it down. Even the soil responded. Crops rose straighter, waters clear without filters. Metal lost its corrosion. Humanity had been granted what scientists would one day call harmonic immunity. The collective heartbeat of creation synchronized again with its source. People reported feeling younger, not in years, but in availability. Their joints moved like forgiveness. Their eyes shone like curiosity returned. You yourself noticed mirrors telling a gentler story. The fatigue behind your reflection had vanished. Your skin carried the shimmer of rest restored. The world was healing through you because you were healing through truth. The bureau's seal appeared across the ether, glowing in quiet authority. Matter now remembers mercy. Heaven's balance had reached the ground. Across the deep fabric of existence, a pulse began to travel. It wasn't sound, it was certainty. Galaxies adjusted their spin to match the new frequency of fairness. Stars hummed at the same tone the angels used when they signed the final audit. Every planet that had ever echoed chaos now vibrated with a simple word: return. In the Bureau's central vault, a final light unfolded, a cosmic communique sent to all planes of awareness. Its message appeared in every form of language known and unknown. Equity achieved. Light RE credited. Nebulas turned their colors inside out in celebration. The Milky Way pulsed once, like a heart acknowledging completed vow. Beings from higher dimensions observed quietly. They did not applaud. They nodded, because restoration was never spectacle. It was structure corrected. The examiner closed the great ledger. The seal of balance pressed itself upon the cover, an infinity loop woven with the word grace. From that moment on, truth traveled faster than deceit. Across the frequencies of creation, the headline repeated endlessly like divine ticker tape. Case closed, harmony restored. The chosen felt the message not in their ears, but in their bones. Their bodies hummed with the same tone as starlight. Somewhere between galaxies, the sound of a great exhale rippled. The universe itself releasing tension after eons of imbalance. Justice had finally exhaled. The halls of light fell silent. The great ledger closed with sound like thunder wrapped in peace. A single figure stood before the bureau. You, no crown, no petition, only presence. The examiner approached, carrying a small orb of light. Identity verified, they said softly. Ownership confirmed. The orb opened, revealing not treasure, but memory. Every moment you stayed kind while unseen, every prayer whispered instead of revenge, every act of patience mistaken for weakness. These were the true currencies of restoration. The examiner smiled. Chosen one, the crown was never stolen. It was waiting for your readiness. And in that instant, your lineage illuminated, not royal by bloodline, but by balance, not wealthy by inheritance, but by wisdom. Heaven spoke through the stillness. The elites didn't change. Balance did. What was yours could never belong to anyone else. The light of your name expanded until it filled the chamber. Isaiah 61, verse 7. Instead of shame, you shall have double honor. You felt it, not pride, but peace, not triumph, but truth returning home. The bureau bowed as one. The audit had ended. Justice was no longer an idea. It was a person, standing radiant in the center of creation. And in the great silence that followed, a final decree rolled across eternity. Case closed. Inheritance restored. The heir has awakened.